extroverts at a party are energized, whereas an introvert might be happy going to a party, but they find it fatiguing. Yeah, so they might enjoy the conversations, but when it comes to midnight, they might be absolutely exhausted. Right? So there's no reason why you can't build extroversion into your skill set, because in the same way you can ask ChatGPT to provide a template or an AI to provide a template for a document, you can also give it examples of maybe meetings that could have gone better, or difficult conversations you've had, or tips to improve active listening. We can almost have a version of ourselves that's challenging us to build those soft skills that help us build that influence as business partners.
Hello everyone. Today on the Business Breaks podcast, I'm thrilled to welcome Adam Shilton, a visionary thought leader who's leveraging AI to transform the finance function. Now, Adam is the founder at Tech for Finance, as well as a senior business consultant for Think. He possesses a unique blend of talents, from being a musician, AI enthusiast, as well as a growing influencer on LinkedIn and in the podcasting world. Now, his journey from music to mastering AI in finance showcases a rare combination of creativity and technical acumen. As a LinkedIn luminary, Adam shares his insights, engaging a wide audience with his innovative approaches to AI in finance. His podcast echoes this expertise, making complex concepts accessible and exciting. So join us to discover how Adam harmonizes his musical background with cutting-edge AI to strike a chord in the finance function. Adam, welcome to Business Breaks.
What an amazing intro. No, fabulous. Strike a chord. Yeah, I'll give you some points for that.
I thought it would be very subtle, but you picked up on it. No flies on you, mate.
No, thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Oh, pleasure. So, Adam, to start off with, can you share your journey with us from the world of music to the realm of finance and technology? And also, how has your musical background influenced your approach in the tech space?
It's a really good question. And I remember a podcast that I had a while back with Anders, Anders Lou Lindberg. And he was one of the first to try and sort of tease out, why music and then why finance. But he didn't ask me how it has influenced, I guess, what I'm doing now. And I suppose there's two sides to it. So there's the community aspect of music, being with others, sharing ideas, and working together to build a piece of music or compose a piece of music. But then there's the more technical aspect of it, because my degree's in music production, not music performance. Yeah, so I am a performer. I play instruments. I enjoy doing that. I've played in bands in a previous life. But the bulk of my study was actually on the technical side of things, in terms of mic setup, using systems like Logic and Pro Tools to do multi-track recordings, using all the gear, sometimes going out to live venues and try and make sure that we get decent quality recording, even in really terrible sound environments. So there's quite a lot of variables that you've got to understand within music, not just from a production point of view, but also from recording and capturing. I've never really thought about it before, but producing a piece of music or recording a live show is a project, just the same as any other project. You've got to think of it in terms of structure, you've got to think of it in terms of order, and then you've got to think of it in terms of quality of output. And the first project that I ever did was with my first originals band. So I was in an Iron Maiden tribute band. That was my first band many years ago. Die-hard metalhead, always will be. So that was fun, but I didn't do any recordings, just performing, right? But then I remember when I ended up sort of moving into sixth form, I ended up in a band called Rosewood. And it had sort of a female singer, and then a couple of guitars doing sort of the dual guitar harmonies and all of that sort of stuff. And we had an absolute ball, we played all over Cambridge, we did some competitions, and that was great. But I really wanted to record us. So with the help of my dad, I got an Avid 11 rack. It's in the loft now 'cause I've got 2 kids. I don't really get much time to record. But I thought I need to capture this as my gap year project. So I was working in a warehouse, actually machining warehouse widgets, and then in the evening I was producing music. Yeah, and that was, I guess, my first passion project of putting something together from its component parts. And because I really enjoyed that, obviously that translated into moving into the music production side of things at university. But again, it was a whole new level. The quality of the production that I managed to achieve, on my own without really much guidance, was nothing compared to what I could then achieve with the new kit that I had in the university studio, for example. But the projects became bigger. I wasn't recording myself in a band that I knew. I was recording others, which was difficult, because if you're doing the recording and the production, you've got to get used to the personalities that you're recording. You've got to understand what people do and don't like. So the drums are way too heavy in that mix. You need to pull it down and all that sort of stuff. So that took me from sort of quite an isolated, introverted approach to music production to actually producing as part of a group. But then moving away from music, my first job was in sales. I sold houses. So I went from uni producing music to then selling houses. But immediately sort of understood that I wasn't going to be selling houses forever in a day. And I got approached for an opportunity in tech, which was for a Microsoft partner at the time. And I thought, right, well, music tech, like business tech, there's probably some synergy there. So I moved in, first job called Call In. Then I worked for different companies selling different types of software. So I moved into sort of energy management, then construction management, and then even agritech. Worked for an agritech business for a while. Again, we won't get too much into the weeds there. But I suppose the theme throughout all of that was going from me in isolation to then, I guess, helping others with my expertise. Yeah. And when you think in terms of software, I mean, the software you use to produce music has buttons and a function and an output and all of that sort of stuff. And it's exactly the same to the buttons in an ERP system. The end goals are just the same. So as soon as you start thinking in terms of systems and frameworks, you've kind of got the hang of it, right? I've always loved to demo software, and that's what really came out when I started moving into the finance and software ERP space. So I guess the elements of my music background that have supported that is the ability to engage with an audience and really understand what people want from a solution, whether the solution is a produced track or the solution is an ERP system, right? And deliver it to the point where everybody's happy. Yeah. And that's the difficult bit. Anybody can give a software demo, but not everybody can actually match the demo to the ambitions to overcome the challenges that a business is facing. And from there, at the core of all ERP systems and finance systems is obviously a finance team, and they've always had a bad rap of being, stuck in the past, all of this manual intervention, messing around with data import, export, all of that sort of stuff. And no sooner are we getting to the point where finance teams are moving from legacy on-premise systems into the cloud, that we've now got the advent of all of this new generative AI stuff. So the pace of change is really tricky at the moment because some businesses aren't even at the point of being able to automate their processes, let alone overlay AI on top of that, right? So the change that I've seen just in the few short years that I've been doing this, probably coming up to 9 years now that I've been working in the tech space, has been absolutely ridiculous. But that's where the finance focus came from. Finance sat at the core of all of the software related projects I'd ever been involved in. So that's when I decided, right, well, I'll continue to try and help. I'll start posting more content. I'll start a podcast because I've always listened to podcasts, love podcasts. So it's that itch that I needed to scratch. And it's going okay, half decent following, some really nice stats, not massive stats, but some really nice stats from the podcast last year. So I'll continue doing what I'm doing. So a long roundabout way of trying to explain how music turned into finance and AI focus, but hopefully that kind of makes sense.
Does completely, and it's nice you leverage your transferable skill set from music and then technology to augment your musical output to technology across a number of different domains before settling and landing on finance, which is great because, as you say, there's opportunity to help certain functions that are stuck in the weeds, that are thinking, well, not beyond their immediate task, but um, but then seeing that, yeah, if you can get your data in one place, like an ERP system, there's so much more you can do with it
Mhm.
beyond just processing transactions. So yeah, you've sounds like it's kind of been a nice, and these paths are never easy. There's a story underneath a story, but unfortunately we've only got about an hour. So but yeah, it's really cool. And I can see how your how your story has been one of adaptation as well as orchestrating different teams, whether they're a band, a IT deployment team, or even a finance team. So yeah, brilliant. You've answered my second question about what sparked your interest in finance technology. So I think we'll move on to AI. And how are you leveraging AI to innovate in finance? Do you have some interesting examples? No doubt.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because, and I guess it's worth just differentiating between AI before November 22 and then AI after with the advent of ChatGPT, right? Because AI is not new. It's really not new. So when you look at base level of intelligence, machine learning, um, and all the algorithms that sit alongside that, they've been built into plenty of platforms for years. Yeah. Whether it's a data analysis platform that's looking over historical data and trying to do predictions, that predictive analysis, that's been available for quite some time. And also having an element of machine learning built into finance systems, again, is not new. You've been able to um, chart outliers and sort of condense month-end close activities by being able to hone in on the stuff that warrants your attention without having to go through all of your journals and go through that massive correction exercise. So that's not new. But what's new is the generative piece, i.e., the AI that doesn't just analyze past data and try and predict the future, or at least highlight the anomalies for correction, is its ability to generate something new. Yeah, hence the generative in generative AI. Now,
Sure.
the tricky bit with all of this is it new? Not really. I had Glenn Hopper, who's somebody you need to follow, sort of an AI and finance visionary, a lot of inspiration for me. Originally introduced by Paul Barnhurst, who does FP&A today. So those two have been very influential on me. But I remember when he came on the podcast, he always referred to at least the first wave of generative AI as predictive text. Yeah. So to use his analogy, when you first got, the brick mobile phones, and texting became more popular, and then, everybody went mad because predictive text would finish a word for you. You know, that is kind of what generative AI is doing, but on a new level. Yeah, because it's looking to the output that you are requesting and trying to predict what that is from the data that it's trained on, right? So it's essentially saying, from my training, more often than not, when somebody asks this or somebody wants this, then the output is this. Yeah, so that's again oversimplifying everything, and maybe not a good explanation, but one that I always use when I think about generative AI. And that's why I say, is it creating something new, or is it just producing something from its training model? And the answer is, it is just producing the highest probability output from its training model. But because it's speaking like a human, and with ChatGPT, because it generates, it doesn't just appear, it generates, it gives that impression that you're actually talking to something that's intelligent, which it is. But it's not artificial general intelligence. We can get into that a little bit later if you want to. But nevertheless, it gives us a lot of power because we have a model that is trained on a vast amount of data that we cannot fit in our own heads, that we can use to produce stuff quicker than we've been able to produce stuff quicker than we've been able. Deary me, not enough coffee today, right? To produce stuff that we've never been able to produce as quickly before, even if our expertise is outside that. So everybody always goes straight to code, right? Oh, I'm not a developer, but I can be a developer because AI is going to tell me how to code. Yes and no. But when you look at some of the, I guess the use cases and the way that I'm using it at the moment is to get a better starting point faster. Yeah. So if I'm producing process documentation, for example, and I want a template, I can just ask AI and it will produce a reasonable template that I can then tweak and make sure that it's fit for purpose. Yeah. Moving into the finance space, historically AI wasn't very good with numbers.
Yeah.
So and it wasn't ever this bad, I don't think, but it was very much a case of it thinking that 2 + 2 = 5. The original versions were really good at just simple arithmetic before you had these platforms such as ChatGPT Pro that now have Python data analysis built into them so that they can do those calculations more correctly. But in terms of other use cases, obviously manipulating spreadsheets, understanding formulas, producing code to be able to do sales forecasting based on whatever algorithm you choose. There's a lot there. But going back to your question about how I personally use it, it's for inspiration. It's to give me a quicker starting point, and it supplements my day-to-day work as almost like a virtual assistant. Yeah. So when I think of leverage now, there's only a few forms of leverage, obviously money, people, or technology. Yeah. Now, previously, you'd have to outsource, data entry activities to a person. You still do if it's a complex data task or something like that. But more and more now with these new tools, you can start offloading some of your activity to AI. And that's why I see AI, at least for me personally, right now, as more of a virtual assistant than something that's going to solve all of my problems for me. Don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. And as you say, it's nothing new. We've had Siri for years now, and even Alexa, right?
Yeah.
So those things are available. And even in terms of generative text, there was it Ask Jarvis?
Mhm.
So it was just prohibitively expensive up until, yeah, ChatGPT came along and kind of changed the game by making it more democratized. So
Mhm.
people can set up free accounts and start playing around with it immediately,
Mhm.
and before even considering to upgrade to the $20 a month or whatever it is, plus
Which
VAT
Yeah,
for us in
which you
the
should.
UK.
You 100% should. I'm not affiliated with OpenAI. I don't get a kickback for saying that, but the use cases for the paid versions of AI are
Mm.
exponentially more than what you can do with the free tool. Quick one, guys. I'd like to take a moment to invite you to the AI Finance Club. The AI Finance Club isn't just another professional group, it's a dedicated platform to help finance pros integrate AI into their work. Now, with AI revolutionizing every aspect of business, staying up to date and building AI skills is no longer an option if you don't want to get left behind. So, with a membership, every month you'll receive a live workshop with industry experts, including me, to help you apply AI in practical finance scenarios. You'll get an in-depth review of the latest AI tools tailored for finance, so you know what works best. You'll get customized AI prompts to help transform the way that you work, curated news and updates on AI advancements in the finance sector, and deep dives into AI in finance processes to help optimize your finance operations. Now, personally, I do believe that a hive mind approach to learning works wonders. So on top of what I've already mentioned, you will have access to a community chat where you can connect, share, and learn from a network of finance professionals who are all embracing AI together. Now, as a Tech for Finance listener, you'll receive 10% off your first annual subscription. Plus, you'll receive free access to the entire ChatGPT for Finance course, both the videos and written guides. Now, to take advantage of this offer, go to techforfinance.com/AI and enter the code ADAM100 at checkout. Once again, that's techforfinance.com/AI with the code Adam100 at checkout. See you there.
Makes sense. And yeah, I mean, it's all about A, democratization, and B, where you've actually caught it and where I think it is going is that Microsoft call it a co-pilot,
Mhm.
and it is that co-pilot, it works with you
Mhm.
as your digital assistant, and the technology is democratized. You've probably seen this on Twitter. Someone tweeted in February, and English is now a coding language.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
so
that's it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But the thing that I will say is, and I've been doing a bit of a comparison recently between different large language models. So I'm now part of the AI Finance Club, which was launched by Nicolas Boucher. Again, somebody you should definitely follow. He really started pushing the way for ChatGPT for finance. But now we've got a bit of a community whereby we release newsletters and we sort of share insights. And what I'm working on at the moment for a newsletter that's hopefully going to come up pretty soon is a comparison of these large language models. And I'll get a little bit into the weeds, and you can tell me off if I'm going too deep.
Go for it.
But the one thing to start by saying is there's a difference between the platform that you use to talk to an AI and the actual large language model AI itself. So to start off with, if you look at ChatGPT allows you to talk to two different models right now. Yeah, so the free version allows you to speak to the large language model GPT 3.5, and the paid version allows you to speak to GPT 4. Now, there's some other witchcraft that happens to allow you to do other stuff in the paid version. So I said previously, you've got that data analysis that can actually use Python code to actually generate documents. So you can generate a spreadsheet, you can generate a Word document, and all of that sort of stuff. But either way, you are interfacing with an AI through a platform, which is a chat interface. Yeah, so both of those models are optimized for chat. So when you type in a text or you upload a picture, if it's a multimodal version, as Bard with Gemini Pro is now, you're speaking to a version of a large language model. Now, there's loads. There are loads of large language models. It's just that OpenAI and ChatGPT has the lion's share of the market right now. Who knows where it's going to go? Microsoft provide a platform to access those same models. It's just optimized in a slightly different way, right? So Bing Chat uses the OpenAI large language models in the background, but it's optimized for web search. Yeah. Copilot, as you've mentioned, Dante, isn't available in the mainstream to everybody yet. Hopefully it will be soon. But larger enterprises that are able to use Copilot are using a version that is optimized to help with Word documents, to help with Excel documents, to help with PowerPoint, and all of those sorts of things. So you are chatting with models, but they are optimized for each use case. Now, moving away from OpenAI, you've got Anthropic, who now have Claude, and Claude 2.1, which is the most advanced model with a massive token window, so you can understand really large documents if you want to upload those and query those. You've got the Llama models from Meta, the same guys as Facebook. They've got their own model. You've now got Mixtral, Mixtral, which is developed by a company called Mistral, Mistral, just to make things really clear. French company, but seen some impressive results from that. And the platform that you can use to access those, you can use something like a poe.com, so you can create your own bots, but you can also talk to all sorts of different models. Bard, obviously, the Google platform, accesses the Gemini Pro model, used to be the Palm 2 model. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that because people immediately think when you start talking about generative AI that it's all about ChatGPT, but it's not. There are multiple models that are optimized for different purposes that you can use in different ways, access through different platforms. Yeah. ChatGPT is the easiest to access. Yeah. You can use Poe, you can use Hugging Chat, which is developed by Hugging Face. I'm sure you're familiar with Hugging Face, Dante. And then you've also got some new contenders as well. I think there's another one that's come out recently called Anakin.ai or something like that. And again, you can use multiple models within the one platform. So you can immediately expand your access to AI for different use cases. So the newsletter is a comparison between all of those to see how they function with different types of tasks. So very simply, text generation and templates. Moving on to more complex stuff like scenario planning, decision support, moving into Excel and formula troubleshooting, moving all the way into advanced coding for forecasting. So what we'll find is all of these models evolve is that I think we'll see more narrow use cases for these different language models. So it's not all going to be about ChatGPT. It's going to be, and the same as we pick different podcast platforms, as we pick different finance software, we will be picking the AIs that are most suitable for the functions that we want them to carry out.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I guess for finance people who might not be on that journey yet, and they're trying to merge their passion for finance with the technology that is available now, what advice would you give to enhance their career?
Career or day to day? I suppose they're linked, I
They're
guess.
kind of linked. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so if we split it in two, so I'll start with the day to day, and then we'll move into, I guess, career. So day to day finance, the challenges are repeat work, not being able to get insights from data quick enough, having to generate complex presentations with a load of data that takes you ages to sift through, all of that sort of stuff. So the more of that stuff that is boring and unuseful we can outsource to AI or automate, the better, right? Automation is not a new thing, robotic process automation, a simple example like VBA scripts for working with spreadsheets, all that sort of stuff. That's not new stuff, but obviously generative AI is. So in terms of day to day, if you are putting reports together or if you are wanting to glean more insights from data, then generative AI can be a mechanism to speed up that process. I've mentioned on previous podcasts Notable, which is a Jupyter notebook similar to Google Colab that you can chain to ChatGPT, upload your data, and start producing visualizations and all that sort of stuff. So there are lots of ways that finance can speed up their day to day by using AI in these different use cases. Just be careful though, because some businesses have policies at the moment around AI. Not all due to data protection. Some companies are just saying, look, we don't want to use it because there's too many unknowns still. I guess what I'm saying there is ask permission, especially if you start using company data, which you shouldn't really be feeding into an AI anyway, unless it's behind a wall and you've got your own AI within your own tenant. Not many companies do. It's a challenge at the moment for many people is, how do they get the AI behind their firewall, as it were? So that's some of the day-to-day stuff. But I'll pinch the recommendations that Nicolas gave me on the last podcast in terms of how to work out what to use and when. And it's a bit of a pain to do, but it's definitely worth it, is think about the tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis and map as many of them as you can. Yeah. So all of your month-end processes, all of the time you spend, using Excel to produce reports and insights and all of that sort of stuff, and try and produce as much of a list as you can of the stuff that you do, and then try and work out what elements of that you think you can speed up. And maybe take a really simple example to begin with, right? A simple example could be, right, well, I've got 3 spreadsheets that I always end up merging into one, but I've got to mess around with columns. I've got to split out the dates and all that sort of stuff. And it takes me, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to do that I could do without. It's not a massive amount of time, but it's still time that I've consumed, right? And instead, right, well, uploads to ChatGPT, merge these 3 into one for me. That's a very simple example of something that could take away 30 minutes worth of work, right? But once you start doing that, you'll then start to see some of the other things that you can start doing to claim back some of that time. But obviously that's from a time perspective. The insights piece is slightly different. Notable is one example, but it's probably too complicated to explain all of the different ways that you can use AI to produce better insights from data on this discussion. But then if we move into your question about how can they leverage it to advance their careers, it's a little bit more of a tricky question to answer. So I've had previous podcast guests that have said that a great way to advance your career is to seek out tech implementation projects. Because if you can say, I've implemented this ERP system, or I've implemented this FP&A tool, or I've implemented this analytics tool, that's another notch on your belt to say, look, I've done this, I understand the process, I've completed that project, it was a success. And that then potentially makes you more employable to the next company that may not have gone through that transformation yet. Yeah. So I guess that's one tech specific means of you being able to advance your career. If you've done it with AI, so if you can say, I managed to have some sort of generative AI methodology built into our finance process, whereby X amount of our workflow was automated with generative AI, but we still had to do this manually because the technology wasn't there yet. Absolutely fine. You've then got another tick on against your name that says they're already using generative AI to start trying to automate or speed up processes within their department. Yeah. And then the third piece, and And it's quite funny, actually. The stats from my podcast for last year highlighted one episode that was loosely related to tech, but not really. How to create impact as a finance business partner. Second ever podcast with Christian Franz Hansen at the Business Partnering Institute. Best performing episode of 2023, even though it was released in 2022. Right? Obviously it's got extra points because it was one of the first episodes, but business partnering is one of those things that's never going to go away. Because as soon as you start mastering the tech, the next thing you then need to master is the emotional intelligence part of the role. How can you build influence? How can I win hearts and minds? All of that sort of stuff. Now, some of it comes with time, and it's difficult, especially if you're introverted. Yeah, and I consider myself a bit of an introvert. Doesn't look like it, because when I get going, I do like to talk. But the reason I know I'm an introvert, and I think it was the party analysis on the Tim Ferriss podcast from ages ago, is that extroverts at a party are energized. Yeah, they speak to everybody. They don't ever want to leave the party. They'll keep going till 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. Whereas an introvert might be happy going to a party, but they find it fatiguing. Yeah, so they might enjoy the conversations, but when it comes to midnight, they might be absolutely exhausted, and I'd fall into that category, right? So there's no reason why you can't build extroversion into your skill set. It might just be that you've got a limited window to be able to be an extrovert. So pick battles wisely, right? But AI in those instances can help us with soft skills. Yeah. Because in the same way you can ask ChatGPT to provide a template, or an AI to provide a template for a document, you can also give it examples of maybe meetings that could have gone better, or difficult conversations you've had, or tips to improve active listening. All of those sorts of things. You can use it as a coach for those softer skills to build those business partnering skills. So without getting too meta, we're kind of into that metacognition, meta-analysis phase, where we can almost have a version of ourselves that's challenging us to build those soft skills that help us build that influence as business partners. And they are going to be the elements that build your career. Now, there's an argument to say that, well, just read a book about it, right? And you can do, but it's maybe not as instant. And now with the advent of GPTs and bots, you can now instruct a bot to say you're an expert in soft skills, or you're an expert in coaching finance business partners. When asked a question, please provide a response in this way that is, usable in terms of conducting better meetings, or building influence with tricky characters, and all of those sorts of things. So I think in terms of career development, once you've got the tech project sorted, once you're happy that you've got to grips with all of the operational stuff, you then need to start moving into the softer stuff and the business partnering to start advancing your career that way. So again, a long answer to maybe a short question, but hopefully that.
No, but it provides context, and it's ironic, right? I've just gotten recently into prompt engineering, and it's, they say be clear in your instruction to the large language model. And people might think clear is being concise, so shorter prompts, but it's not actually. The more detail you give, the more specificity, the more context you provide, the better the outputs. So yeah, I can see that's probably where you're coming from in terms of feeding more information to kind of provide more clarity. And that's how you need to speak to AI, I guess.
Ask a better question, get a better answer, right? And the analogy I always use is, you wouldn't just give a person a sentence if you wanted them to do something for you. You provide context. You try and bring them up to speed with what you were trying to achieve. You wouldn't just say, "Oh, go write a template for me." So that context is important. The only thing that I would say, though, is when AI or generative AI was first released, a lot of people got into prompt engineering quite quickly, because everybody was saying, "Oh, prompt engineering is the new skill, and basically, you're not going to have a career unless you can become a decent prompt engineer." And I've always been a bit skeptical of that, because I kind of knew from the start that this was a journey, right? And to have to give an AI context, about what you were trying to achieve every time you enter the prompt, is just a completely unworkable way of carrying out your day to day, because I don't want to have to give, a massive prompt every time I want an instruction to be carried out. So the first way that was made easier was with the custom instructions that OpenAI released. I don't know whether you've played with them, but if you go into the settings, you can enter a custom instruction. You can say, what do you want the AI to know about you, and how do you want it to respond? And that's that base level providing context, so that you don't have to give a paragraph for where you're coming from and where you want to go. Yeah. I think we're going to see an evolution of that to the point where we're not giving context anymore. We're instead giving outcomes. So we're now moving into the category of agents, whereby you can give just an end result and then they can prompt themselves. We're still a way off with that. Agent GPT was the first iteration, but it was buggy, got confused, and there's not been much progress since, unfortunately. But coming back to what you're saying there about clarity of prompt, yes, that's very important, but not to the point where you've got an A4 page worth of mega prompt, because we've still got to remember that these models still only have a limited window for how much information they can process at one time. Now they're getting better, and the windows for how much information they can understand are better. So I'll use an example. Claude 2.1, which is now only available in the paid version of Claude, is one that I've been weighing against the other large language models on the basis that if it's got a really big token window, it must be able to understand really complex prompts better than the equivalent language model with a shorter token window. But it's not the case. Claude 2.1, and again, nothing against Anthropic, but for the use cases that I've experimented with, is actually one of the worst performers, even though the token window is so much larger. Now, I don't know why that is, but the responses are still really poor. So my recommendation is, yes, build your prompt, as big as you want it to be, but then maybe chunk it up. And I did a LinkedIn post about this, right? And I'll use an example. So if I just get up my notes from this comparison that I've been doing, I'm not going to share my screen, but I'll just give you the 3 parts of a prompt that I've been using to test, the forecasting piece, so producing Python code. So it's split into 4 parts actually, because I want it to give me support as somebody who doesn't know code. Yeah, so the first part of the prompt is act as a Python coder who works closely with finance teams. I'm starting from scratch using Google Colab, but I'm a novice, so please provide easy to understand instructions. And then the end of that first prompt is please confirm that you understand these instructions. And then immediately you've got that context embedded, and the response that you should get is hopefully, yes, I understand the instructions. What do you want me to do next? The second part is then giving an example of the data and then saying generate the code as well as a simple visualization. Yeah. So it's got the example data, not all of it for data security reasons. We don't want to actually give it our data, but we can give it the format. Yeah. Because once it knows the format, it can then generate the code that we can use with a much larger data set that isn't anonymized, that we can then run in Google Colab. So that's the second part of the prompt. The third part is I want the visualization to show the forecast in orange. And then the fourth part of the prompt is I want to download the forecast in Excel. Yeah, if we'd asked all of those component elements as one prompt, you're increasing the chances of the language model getting confused and not knowing what to prioritize. Yeah, and I've found this when I've been experimenting with creating GPTs, the bots with certain purposes. So one example that I tried to do is taking transcribed notes from a recording, and then having the AI pull out the tasks, the content ideas, certain parts of a newsletter that I dictated. So within that one bot, I was basically giving it 3 different instructions, and the output that I got from it was very, very poor because it was getting confused. Right? Well, am I pulling out tasks? Yeah. Am I generating content ideas? Do you see what I mean? So you can very quickly trip up these models if you're trying to engineer multiple outcomes into a single prompt. So chunk it up, simplify it, and try and actually have a conversation with it as opposed to trying to get it right first time.
Makes sense. Yeah, and that's the element of supervision through the process and overseeing the quality without committing too much up front and expecting that one shot to hit the target first time.
Yeah, because otherwise you'll get into the rabbit hole that I've got down to loads of times, whereby you're trying to re-engineer that first prompt. And I'm sure you found it as well, right? Mega prompt, not giving my output right. What do I need to change in the prompt? But that's the wrong way of looking at things. The right way to look at things is, right, well, I know what output I want to create. How can I shorten this and chunk it up into different stages of a conversation in the same way that I'd have different stages of conversation with a human to produce better outputs?